Well, good evening and welcome to another production of Cepher Publishing Group and the Cepher Academy. And welcome to our presentation tonight on I Remember as Well, a journey through the remainder of the Cepher Zakaryahu. I want to thank you for joining me, brothers and sisters. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this ministry. Thank you for being a part of the subscriber chat. And I really appreciate your feedback and hope that you have a pleasant time during the course of this video. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the remainder of the book of Zechariah or Zakar-Yahu. And when we embarked on this 2 weeks ago, we did chapters 1 through 6. Tonight, we're going to be doing chapters 7 through 14. We'll be taking a look at the rest of the prophecies. And I pray that this is going to be edifying to you and there's going to be a blessing to you. And as we go through this, I'm also hopeful that we're going to be able to discover the things that we need to discover as we talk about this. I think we're going to see some interesting things that are going to be worthy of review. And if there are questions during the course of this presentation, please let me know, and I will try to catch up on those questions as we go, okay? When you put them in the chat, all right? Okay, so let's begin. I remember as well a journey through the remainder of the Cepher Zakaryahu. And it came to pass in the 4th year of King Darius that the word of Yahuah came unto Zakar-Yahu in the 4th day of the 9th month, even in Kislev, when they had sent unto the house of El-Sharetzer and Regem-Melech and their men to pray before Yahuah and to speak unto the priests which were in the house of Yahuah, Zevot, and to the prophets, saying, should I weep in the 5th month and separating myself as I have done these so many years? Okay, well, a couple of things here in this prophecy, the very first verses of chapter 7. First of all, we're talking about the 4th year of the king Darius. Now, that puts us, scholars agree that puts us around 518 BC. You might recall that the temple was destroyed in 586 BC. However, the invasion of Jerusalem and the taking away of the captives actually occurred before that in 593 BC. That is important because when you look at the record, you will discover that the Babylonian captivity ended 70 years from that day, not 70 years from 586, but rather 70 years from 593. 518 BC now is going to be some 5 years after that. And we can see here that just by the pure strength of the verse, calling the 9th month Kislev is an identifier that shows the Babylonian influence on what was the prior Hebrew text. That the months of the year changed their names. One of the most dominant features of the Babylonian captivity is that the months changed their names. So that from the point of the return in 523 BC and forward, we would see names like Kislev, Av, and Tammuz, and Tishri, and Nisan, and so forth. These are names that are common to Babylonian understanding and would birth the Aramaic block script, okay? The Aramaic block script and the Babylonian understanding of the months. There would be other Babylonian influences as well that would ultimately result in a Babylonian Talmud that emerged around the 3rd century AD. Now, when we get to the end of this verse, he says, should I weep in the 5th month, separating myself as I have done so many years? Well, the 5th month would be Av in the Babylonian count, Babylonian reckoning. And we're talking about the 9th of Av. The 9th of Av is a significant day in the history of the temple. On the 9th of Av, in 586 BC, the first temple, that of the Temple of Solomon, was burned to the ground by the troops of Nebuchadnezzar. But The rebuilt temple that was completed sometime later would be burned to the ground again by the Romans in 70 AD. And that also would occur on the 9th of Av, the 9th day of the 5th month. And finally, the Alhambra decree, which was the decree executed by Ferdinand and Isabella in Catholic Spain in the year 1492, which expelled Jews and Muslims from Spain as a matter of law, was executed on the 9th of Av in 1492. So this date becomes a significant date of tragedy for the community, the temple community. And here, Zakar-Yahu asks the question, shall I continue to weep in the 5th month as I have done these many years? And the answer to that question is yes, because there is yet more tragedy to come on the 9th day of the 5th month. Then came the word of Yahuah. Oh, now someone asked, April Carlson asked the question, what is the 9th of Av to the Gregorian calendar? Well, that's a good question, April. It varies, and it varies greatly because there is never a settled date between the first of the year, the first day of Aviv, and the Gregorian calendar. It moves every single year. And the reason it moves is because the Gregorian calendar is an algorithm that is placed over the natural calendar on Earth. The natural calendar is going to have a different starting date. The natural calendar will begin on the last new moon before the vernal equinox. The last new moon before the vernal equinox, the calendar begins, and the calendar begins with the first of Aviv. And then you have a count that goes from there, which quite often makes the first day of Av, rarely does it fall on the first day of the Gregorian month. But this is what you're talking about. In the 5th month, you're going to be speaking somewhere around August, okay, around August. Then came the word of Yahuah Tsebaot unto me, saying, speak unto all the people of the land and to the priests, saying, when ye fasted and mourned in the 5th and the 7th month, even those 70 years. Now, the 7th month fast is the fasting of Yom Kippur. So the 5th month fast is the fasting that weeps over the destruction of the temple on the 9th of Av. But the 7th month in the Babylonian world, called Tishri, would be the fast of Yom Kippur, fast of Yom Kippur. Even though you mourned in the 5th and the 7th month, even those 70 years, did ye eat at all? Did ye at all fast unto me, even to me? And when ye did eat, and when ye did drink, did ye not eat for yourselves and drink for yourselves? Should ye not hear the words which Yahuah has cried by the former prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited and in prosperity, and the cities thereof round about her, when men inhabited the Negev and the plain? And the plain, that's interesting. I wonder what they're speaking of, the Negev, the south, and the plain. Which plain? And the word of Yahuah came unto Zakar-Yahu, saying, thus speaks Yahuah Sebaot, execute true judgment and show mercy and compassions every man to his brother, and oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. This was the teaching of Yeshayahu in Isaiah 59, saying, this is the true fast. Not that you stop eating and put on ashes and sackcloth and run around mourning about how hungry you are, but rather fasting while executing true judgment and showing mercy and compassion to stop the oppression of the widow. In fact, Isaiah even says to put away the finger, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor. Let none of you imagine evil against your brother in your heart. Such an important teaching in terms of what a true fast is. But they refused to hearken and pulled away the shoulder and stopped their ears that they should not hear. Yea, they made their hearts as an adamant stone, lest they should hear the Torah. and the words which Yahuah Tsebaot has sent in his Ruach by the former prophets. Therefore came a great wrath from Yahuah Tsebaot. Therefore it has come to pass that as he cried, they would not hear. So they cried, and I would not hear, says Yahuah Tsebaot. But I scattered them with the whirlwind among all the nations whom they knew not. Thus the land was desolate after them, that no man passed through or returned, for they laid the pleasant land desolate. So you see that when the prophets call, you have a responsibility to listen. And if you don't listen, then do not be surprised when your prayers are no longer heard. Again, the word of Yahuah Tsebaot came unto me, saying, Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, I was jealous for Zion with great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury. Thus says Yahuah, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, and the mountain of Yahuah Tsebaot, the holy mountain. Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, if it be marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, should it also be marvelous in my eyes? Says Yahuah Tsebaot. Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country, and I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim in truth and in righteousness. Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, let your hands be strong, ye that hear in these days at these words by the mouth of the prophets, which were in the day that the foundation of the house of Yahuah Tsebaot was laid, that the temple might be built. For before these days there was no hire for man, nor any hire for beast, neither was there any peace to him that went out or came in because of the affliction. For I set all men, every one against his neighbor. But now I will not be unto the remnant of this people as in the former days, says Yahuah Tsebaot. For the seed shall be prosperous, the vine shall give her fruit, the ground shall give her increase, and the heavens shall give their dew. And I will cause the remnant of this people to possess all of these things. And it shall come to pass that as you were a curse among the heathen, O house of Yehudah and house of Yasharel, so will I save you, and ye shall be as a blessing. Fear not, but let your hands be strong. For thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, as I thought to punish you when your fathers provoked me to wrath, says Yahuah Tsebaot, and I repented not, so again have I thought in these days to do well unto Jerusalem and to the house of Yehudah. Fear not. These are the things that ye shall do. Speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor. Execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. And let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. And love no false oath. For all these are things that I hate, says Yahuah. And the word of Yahuah Tsebaot came unto me, saying, thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, the fast of the 4th month, and the fast of the 5th month, and the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th, shall be to the house of Yehudah joy and gladness, and cheerful feasts. Therefore, love the truth and peace. Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, it shall come to pass that there shall come people, and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to one another, saying, let us speedily to pray before Yahuah, and to seek Yahuah Tsebaot. I will go also. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek Yahuah Tsebaot in Jerusalem, and to pray before Yahuah. Thus says Yahuah Tsebaot, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all the languages of the nation, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Yehudi, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that Elohim is with you. Now, in addition to the 7 feasts, there are also 7 fasts. 4 fast days emerge from the scripture set forth here in Zakar-Yahu 8:19, which are declared to commemorate the destruction of both the first and second temples and the exile of the house of Yehudah into Babylon and beyond. There are a total of 7 Tzomot fasts, including the fast that is declared for Yom Kippur. So let's take a look at these fasts. Ta'anit Bikurim. This is a fast of the firstborn, which is only observed by firstborn males. This fast commemorates the salvation from the 10th plague of the firstborn in Egypt, although following the destruction of the second temple, it also mourns the end of the Levitical priesthood. This fast is observed on the day of Pesach, the 14th of Aviv. Tzom Revi'i. This is a fast day on the 17th day of Revi'i, or in the Babylonian calendar, Tammuz, which commemorates the breaking down of the wall of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and the taking away of the temple sacrifice during the siege of Titus in 70 AD. This is the fast of the 4th month. Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, or Hamashi. Hamashi is the biblical name for the month. Av is the Babylonian name for the month. This is a well-known fast day, which commemorates the tragedies of the Yahudim. The fast is known as the fast of the 5th month, and it is the second most important fast in the Yehudi world. On the eve of the fast, it is customary to eat a boiled egg sprinkled with ashes. Zom Gedalia. Zom Gedalia. This is the fast of the 7th month and is a fast that occurs immediately following the 2-day celebration of Yom Teruah, which occurs on the 1st day of the 7th month. This fast commemorates the assassination of Gedaliah, the king who replaced Zedekiah, the replacement of Jehoiakim, the last rightful king of Yehudah in the line of Jesse until HaMashiach. You might recall that the assassination of Gedaliah was a person who tried to seize control after Zedekiah was captured by Nebuchadnezzar. The temple was burned, the nobility had been taken into captivity, and what remained was the commoners. And among them, Gedaliah tried to seize control of Jerusalem at the point of a sword. And this turned very, very bad, and he was ultimately assassinated. And the remnant, instead of remaining in Jerusalem, as they were told to do by Jeremiah, instead fled. They fled to Egypt. And those who fled to Egypt died in Egypt. Jeremiah, on the other hand, continued on from Egypt with Tamar, the daughter of Zedekiah, and Baruch, his scribe. And they traveled into Ireland. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of Etanim, or in the Babylonian calendar, Tishri. And it's the most set-aside day of the year. This is a fast day and a Sabbath, so no work is permissible. Then Asara B'Tevet, the 10th day of Asari, or Tevet, is a fast day commemorating the fall of Jerusalem. The prayer, the Kaddish, is recited on this day, and this is referred to as the fast of the 10th month. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Kaddish, but the Kaddish is supposedly a prayer of mourning but it's really a rather reverent prayer. It's a rather reverent prayer. And I do not believe that the Kaddish is anathema to the believer, that the prayer. It is anathema if it becomes incantation. But otherwise, as a prayer, I do not believe it is anathema. Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther, is observed on 3 days before Purim on Asar Shenaim, or Adar 11, and is traditionally a 3-day fast. Nice way, traditionally. All right, let us continue now with our read through Zechariah. And as we read through Zechariah, let's start picking up here in chapter 9. The burden of the word of Yahuah in the land of Shadrach and Damascus shall be the rest thereof, when the eyes of man, as of all the tribes of Yasharel, shall be toward Yahuah. And Hamath also shall border thereby, Zor and Sidon, though it be very wise. And Zor did build herself a stronghold, and heaped up silver as the dust, and fine gold as the mire of the streets. Behold, Adonai will cast her out, and he will smite her power in the sea, and she shall be devoured with fire. Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza also shall see it and be very sorrowful. And Ekron, for her expectation, shall be ashamed. And the king shall perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. Well, this is very interesting because all of these cities that are mentioned here, with the exception of possibly Ekron, are going to be port cities. Although you have to keep in mind that Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, Ekron, and so forth are not natural ports, because that whole coast of Israel is rather flat. It has no indentation where a ship can port. This is why Herod built a port at Caesarea or Caesarea. And you see that the only natural port really that exists in all of Israel is the port of Akko to the north side of Haifa. Sor, it is believed, is a port that had essentially created a harbor on an island and a bridge connecting the island. But you can see that Sor, or Tyre, as you might read in many other scripts, Tyre, was a merchant city. The people living there were capitalists who were engaged in trade. And it's my conviction that this was the tribe of Asher, who was always gifted with, as part of the blessing of Yaakov, to be managers of the ports. And Asher managed the port of Sor. And this is where we get, Hiram, who provided all the materials to Solomon to build the temple. Because Sor, or Tyre, is the place where all the capitalism was being practiced in the northern kingdom. It was not being practiced in the southern kingdom. What was being practiced in the southern kingdom was taxation, taxing those who were making the wealth, and the wealth was being made in Tyre. And as you can see here, that Tyre, or Tsor, did build herself a stronghold. And what? Tyre had the money to build a stronghold and then heaped up silver and fine gold. They became very wealthy. But Tyre would be judged, and it would be judged. Sidon, on the other hand, is at the other end of the Mediterranean. I believe the ancient Sidon was actually Gibraltar. Okay. And so you had all this merchandising that was taking place in the Mediterranean, shipping, and it was managed out of Tyre. But this is going to fall because Alexander would come in and conquer all of these places. Now, when Alexander did this, the shipping capital would move from Tyre to Athens. And Athens would become a shipping capital managed again by the house of Asher. And from there, this shipping capital would move, although there still is a great deal of shipping happening out of Athens even today. But this shipping capital would move to Venice. And Venice would become the merchant city of all of the Mediterranean and under the Venetian Republic. Again, the ports being managed by the tribe of Asher. Now the situation is slightly different because the primary port in the Mediterranean right now is Barcelona. And Barcelona is not a Spanish port, although it is part of Spain, but it is a Catalanian port. And the Catalans are the ones who manage this shipping center. And they are, in my opinion, of the tribe of Asher, the tribe of Asher. And once again, here we see them managing a port and managing the merchandise. All right, let's see. Did this prophecy actually happen? Yes, Alexander wholly depopulated the city of Ashdod. And the bastard shall dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Pelishtim. Alexander completely depopulated the city and then repopulated it with other people. And I will take away the blood, his blood out of his mouth and his abominations from between his teeth. But he that remains, even he shall be for our Elohim, and he shall be as a governor in Yahudah, and Ekron as a Yebusi. And I will encamp about my house because of the army, because of him that passes by, and because of him that returns. And no oppressor shall pass through them anymore, for now I have seen with my eyes. And again, a prediction of Alexander coming through the area in Zechariah 9. Continuing, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes unto you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. And I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace unto the heathen. And his dominion shall be from sea even to sea, and from the river even unto the ends of the earth. Now we see this prophecy is very significant because it is prophesying and predicting the Mashiach who would come and speak peace unto the heathen. And is his dominion from sea to sea, and from the river even to the ends of the earth? It is. Did he cut off the chariot from Ephraim? Yes, he did. And the horse from Jerusalem? Yes, he did. And the battle bow shall be cut off. It was taken away entirely. But was the king taken away? No. Was his peace taken away? No. Was his dominion taken away? No. But when we get to verse 11, we have something interesting because it's a different prophecy. As for you also, by the blood of your covenant, I have sent forth your prisoners out of the pit wherein there is no water. Now that's an interesting phrase. That is a very interesting phrase. And it is something that is going to have direct meaning because it comes from the book of Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah 38 verse 6. Then they took Yirmiyahu and cast him into the dungeon of Malchiyahu, the son of Hamelech, that was in the court of the prison. And they let down Yirmiyahu with cords, and in the dungeon there was no water, but mire. So Yirmiyahu sunk in the mire. Can you imagine? They put him in the cistern in the middle of the court, and they dropped him down by rope so he could not climb out. And when he got to the bottom, it was not solid ground where he could lay down and sleep, but rather it was muck and mire, and he sunk in it. And this is where the Babylonians would find him. So we have an interesting prophecy here. As for you also. So that is a phrase there in Zechariah 9:11, separating itself from 9:10. Now we get to 9:11, right? Prophetically, we get to 9:11. And when we get to 9:11, we see something new. As for you also, by the blood of your covenant, I have sent forth your prisoners out of the pit wherein there is no water. Okay, so this, by the blood of the covenant of Yahuah, Jeremiah would be lifted out of the pit and be sent forth. An important prophecy that we will see being realized in a very unexpected way. Okay, let's continue in Zechariah 9. Turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. Even today do I declare that I will render double unto you. When I have bent Yahudah for me and filled the bow with Ephraim and raised up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Yavan, and made you as the sword of a mighty man. And Yahuah shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as the lightning, and Adonai Yahuah shall blow the shofar and shall go with the whirlwinds of the south. Yahuah Sebaot shall defend them, and they shall devour and subdue with sling stones, and they shall drink and make a noise as through wine, and they shall be filled like bowls, and as the corners of the altar. And Yahuah Elohim shall save them in that day as the flock of his people, for they shall be as the stones of a crown, lifted up as an ensign upon his land. For how great is his goodness, and how great is his beauty. Grain shall make the young men cheerful, and the new wine the maids. And so he's talking about new wine. He's talking about new wine in a new container, right? In a new bag, in a new wine bag. And this group that is going to be lifted up is going to be lifted up. They're going to be lifted up as the flock of his people, for they shall be as the stones of a crown. And so this is not necessarily telling you that he is lifting up Yehudah, but rather he is lifting up a group that is going to take down Yavan. Yavan, and they're going to do it by the sword of a mighty man. This, in my opinion, is predicting the rise of the Maccabees and the overthrowing of the Greek control of the temple and Jerusalem that would take place circa 165 BC. 165 BC. And so in this period of time, the Maccabees would rise up and they would defeat Antiochus. They would defeat Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, hold on. Somebody is asking me if this is the Euphrates in verse 11. No, that is not the. Let me go back here just a minute. As for your blood, I was sent forth your prisoners out of the pit wherein there is no water. No, that is not the Euphrates. That is the pit in which Jeremiah was cast. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's keep going. Now, ask ye of Yahuah. Okay, we're going to move on to chapter 10 now. Ask ye of Yahuah. Joy? No, it wasn't Cyrus that rescued Zakar-Yahu. Maybe Zakar-Yahu, that's possible. Yeah. But he did not rescue Jeremiah. Jeremiah was rescued by the troops of Nebuchadnezzar, who said when they found him in the pit after they had killed Zedekiah, well, the enemy of the enemy must be our friend. Therefore, they let him out. Ask ye of Yahuah, rain in the time of the latter rain. So Yahuah shall make bright clouds and give them showers of rain. To everyone grass in the field. For the teraphim have spoken vanity, and the diviners have seen a lie and have told false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore they went their way as a flock. They were troubled because there was no shepherd. My anger was kindled against the shepherds, and I punished the goats. For Yahuah Sebaot has visited his flock, the house of Yehudah, and has made them as his goodly horse in the battle. Out of him came forth the corner, the battlement. Out of him the nail, out of him the battle bow, and out of him every oppressor together. Now, here we have something very interesting, because this word does, in fact, appear in the underlying Hebrew, and it is a word worth knowing. The teraphim. The teraphim have spoken vanity. Now, a teraphim, for all intents and purposes, was a shrunken head. It was a head that was of the person, and typically it was the head of a firstborn male that had been killed by whoever owned the head. And they would keep the head, and they would shrink the head, and they would sew the lips together and put a gold coin in the mouth of the teraphim. And they would keep this shrunken head, and they would either hang it from their tents or they would place it up on their mantle. But they would pray to the teraphim, and the teraphim would speak back to them, at least in their mind. Laban, the father of Rachel and Leah, he had many teraphim that he listened to. And the teraphim, when you see Zakar-Yahu saying that the teraphim have spoken vanity, it tells you that even at the time of Solomon's temple, that there were people inside the community that were maintaining teraphim, that were maintaining shrunken heads. And these teraphim have spoken vanity. And the diviners have seen a lie. And they've told false dreams. Now, I don't know if many of them were eating pizza or not, but sometimes you have to be careful about your dreams, that you're not having a pizza dream and rather having a vision. But they comfort in vain, saying peace and safety. There's nothing to worry about. None of that's ever going to happen. Just relax. Everything's going to be fine. Put your head back in the sand and don't worry your heart about it. Everything's going to be fine. Then the next thing you know, they're eating their own children, and they've been in a siege for multiple years, and they've been carried away captive, and their king has been murdered with his 7 sons, and their temple is burned to the ground. Well, wait a minute. Should we have been troubled about that? No. Don't you worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. Okay, but there was no shepherd. And because there was no shepherd, Yah's anger was kindled against the shepherds and punished the goats. He has visited his flock in the house of Yahudah, but the shepherds were gone. Now, this is going to continue. We're going to see something here interesting in this prophecy. And they shall be as mighty men, which tread down their enemies in the mire of the streets in the battle, and they shall fight because Yahuah is with them. And the riders on horses shall be confounded, and I will strengthen the house of Yahudah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them again to place them. For I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I had not cast them off. For I am Yahuah Elohim, and I will hear them. And they of Ephraim shall be like a mighty man, and their heart shall rejoice as though through wine. Yea, their children shall see it and be glad, and their heart shall rejoice in Yahuah. Now, I don't know that this passage has happened yet, because this seems to be the joining of the 2 sticks, the house of Yehudah and the house of Joseph. You might remember the stick of Joseph in the hands of Ephraim will be joined to the stick of Yahudah. That's Ezekiel 37. And I will bring them again to place them. Well, the house of Joseph has not been placed in Jerusalem with the house of Yehudah. Not yet. It hasn't happened. I will hiss for them, or whistle, and gather them, for I have redeemed them, and they shall increase as they have increased. And I will sow them among the people, and they shall remember me in far countries, and they shall live with their children and turn again. I will bring them again also out of the land of Mitzrayim and gather them out of Ashur. I will bring them into the land of Gilad and Lebanon, and place shall not be found for them, because there'll be so many of them, right? And he shall pass through the sea with affliction, and shall smite the waves in the sea, and all the deeps of the river shall dry up, and the pride of Ashur shall be brought down, and the scepter of Mitzrayim shall depart away, and I will strengthen them in Yahuah, and they shall walk up and down in his name, says Yahuah. Okay, yeah, fantastic teaching. Again, a prophecy talking about, I believe, the second Exodus. Now, when we talk about this, we mentioned this before. If you are a person that says, "Oh, I could have done the wilderness experience with Moshe, no problem." Well, think about it. There you are, trapped on the beachhead. Pharaoh's armies are coming to slaughter you to the last person. They've got chariots and all of their best troops, and you don't have anything. You don't have any army. You're just sitting there with your sheep and your cattle, waiting across the sound, which you can't get across. And so you wait all that night with Yah putting them off with a flame of fire and a cloud until the following morning. And in the following morning, the water parts. And it is a wall of water. Now, how tall was that wall of water? Was it 20 feet? Was it 60 feet? Was it 100 feet? And you walk across this dry area that would later flood the troops of Mitzrayim. Well, when you're seeing here, he says, and he shall pass through the sea with affliction, and shall smite the waves in the sea, and all the deeps of the river shall dry up. What if you're required to walk 1,200 miles with a wall of water 9,000 feet high? Would you do it? Oh, there you go. Open your doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour your cedars. Howl, fir tree, for the cedar is fallen, because the mighty are spoiled. Howl, O you oaks of Bashan, for the forest of the vintage has come down. There is a voice of the howling of the shepherds, for their glory is spoiled. A voice of the roaring of young lions, for the pride of the Yarden is spoiled. Thus says Yahuah Elohim, feed the flock of the slaughter, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. And they that sell them say, blessed be Yahuah, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. For I will no more pity the inhabitants of the land, says Yahuah, but lo, I will deliver the men, every one into his neighbor's hand, and into the hand of his king, and they shall smite the land, and out of their hand I will not deliver them. Well, you can see that this is what is happening here today, even today. Whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. Yeah, we killed a lot of you, but we had a trial and decided that we were not guilty because we're immune, because we are your possessors. Therefore, we can't commit crime. And I will feed the flock of the slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staves. The one I called beauty. It's the word there is noam. And the other I called bands, or chabal. And I fed the flock. 3 shepherds also I cut off in 1 month. And my soul loathed them. And their soul also abhorred me. Then said I will not feed you. That dies, let it die. That is to be cut off, let it be cut off. And let the rest eat every one the flesh of one another. You know, horrendous, absolutely horrendous prophecy. And this is a prophecy concerning the fact that there are no true shepherds. The shepherds are gone. And because the shepherds are gone and they have been possessed by a possessor who kills them and then justifies himself, I've done no wrong, even though that possessor will face judgment and be put up in front of his own king to be judged. Nonetheless, the flock will be fed to slaughter. And Yahuah takes the 2 staves, one called beauty and one called bands, habal. So Noam here means agreeableness, delight, suitableness, splendor or grace, beauty, pleasantness. Now you might recall that when we read in Genesis and also in the book of Jasher, that Noah's wife was a woman who went by the name Naamah. Now the here is the feminine suffix. And so what does this mean? She who is beautiful. So even though we can see here that our friends, the Masoretes, are going to tell us, oh no, it's Noam. Why is it Noam? Well, because we put Holam over here. We put the dot right there. Therefore, it has an O in it because we put a dot there. Once we put a dot there, that means it's got an O because we put a dot there. But really, no. The true name here is not Noam, but rather Naam. The staff called beauty, Naam. Okay. All right. And I took my staff, even beauty, and I cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I had cut with all the people. Now this becomes huge here. And it was broken in that day. It was broken in that day. So we're talking about a singular day, so that the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of Yahuah. And I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And Yahuah said unto me, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of Yahuah. Then I cut asunder the other staff, even bands, that I might break the brotherhood between Yahudah and Yasharel. And this brotherhood was broken. This brotherhood was broken. Now look, the covenant, what covenant was it that he had given with all the people? Well, it's from Bereshith 17:7. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant to be Elohim unto you and to your seed after you. And I will give unto you and to your seed after you the land wherein you are a stranger, and all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. But here he is going to cut that covenant. He's going to break the staff of beauty, and that it will allow him to cut and to terminate the covenant. Now, we see something interesting here. No, I didn't want to do that. Okay. Well, I guess we are going to have subtitles. All right. Let's take a look and see. Note that Yahudah, Judas, Ishkariot, betrayed Mashiach for the silver before they sat down for the Last Supper on Pesach, when the covenant was renewed. Okay? And here we can see evidence of this in Matthew 26, beginning at verse 10. When Yahusha understood it, he said unto them, why trouble ye the woman? For she has wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she has poured this ointment upon my body, she did it for my burial. Amen, I say unto you, wheresoever this Besserah shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman has done, be told for a memorial of her. Then one of the 12, called Yahudah Ishkariot, Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priest and said unto them, what will ye give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time, he sought an opportunity to betray him. So you see hard evidence here that what took place was Judas accepted the 30 pieces of silver before the Last Supper. The betrayal was already done. Okay, it's too high up. Okay, all right, good. Well, I'm not writing it. The computer's writing it. So that's it. That's the way it goes. Okay. All right, well, let's continue. And Yahushua said unto me, take unto you yet the instruments of a foolish shepherd. For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, neither shall seek the young one, nor heal that which is broken, nor feed that which stands still. But he shall eat the flesh of the fat and tear their claws in pieces. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaves the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. Now, this is a very interesting passage that I have been waiting to see who this is going to be, because I don't believe this passage has been realized yet. However, when you compare this to Islamic eschatology forecasts a person called the Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, the Dajjal, or the deceitful Messiah. And the Dajjal is blind in one eye, and he will deceive starving masses, especially the Jews, by performing miracles. He will raise an army that will kill and conquer and corner his nemesis, the Mahdi, along with a small army of Muslim fighters in Jerusalem. Isa will descend from heaven just in time to kill him and defeat his army. That's in the Quran. Okay, well, I'm not here to preach the Quran, but I am pointing out to you that the Quran has a similar figure called the Dajjal to this idle shepherd that is identified here in Zakar-Yahu. Zakar-Yahu 12. The burden of the word of Yahuah for Yasharel, says Yahuah, which stretches forth the heavens and lays the foundation of the earth and forms the ruach of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about. Now let's think about that for a minute. What is a cup of trembling, right? A cup of trembling. If you have a cup in your hand and it trembles, well, then the water inside the cup is also trembling, right? A trembling cup is something where the contents within the cup are also trembling. When they shall be in the siege, both against Yehudah and against Jerusalem. In that day, I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Well, that sounds an awful lot like the United States, which just can't get enough of Jerusalem. Though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. In that day, says Yahuah, I will smite every horse with astonishment and his rider with madness, and I will open my eyes upon the house of Yehudah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Yehudah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength. In Yahuah Sebaot Elohehem. Kind of hard to say that right now with the kind of situation that's going on in Jerusalem. That's at a quasi-civil war state between the Orthodox and the secular Jews, who have two completely distinct worldviews. In that day, will I make the governors of Yehudah like a hearth of a fire among the wood, like a torch of a fire in a sheath, and they shall devour all people round about on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. Yahuah also shall save the tents of Yehudah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Yehudah. So you see the distinction between the tents of Yehudah and the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. The tents of Yehudah shall be saved first. In that day, Yahuah shall defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as Elohim, and as the angel of Yahuah before them. Well, I don't have an answer for this, because when we talk about in that day, Yahuah defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, he that is feeble among them that day shall be as David. Isn't that a prophecy of Mashiach? And the house of David, that is on the throne of Mashiach, shall be as Elohim, and as the angel that goes before them? I think so. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the Ruach and V'tachanunim, or the spirit of grace and supplication. And they shall look upon me at whom they have pierced. And they shall look upon me at whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his Yachid, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Now, this is a very interesting passage, and I think it's worthy of note for us to spend just a little bit of time on it. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. Now, you might recall I've gotten in big trouble before talking about what is blasphemy. And blasphemy is this nechab. And nekab means, in the first instance, to pierce. To strike through. And as I mentioned before, that when you talk about striking through, we talk about striking through the name, for instance, which happens verbally when you strike through the name to say a different name. When you're reading the name Yahuah and you strike through it to say Hashem, or you strike through it to say Adonai, you are engaged in nakav. You have struck through and pierced the name. But we also see that when we talk about the Greek word logos, in the beginning was the word, the logos, and the logos was with Elohim, and the logos was Elohim. When we talk about this word logos, what does this word logos mean, really? We can try to corner it and say, well, it means the word, but it means so much more than that. Does it mean a specific word? It's possible that it does. In the beginning was the name. In the beginning was the name, and the name was with Elohim, and the name was Elohim. Elohim was with the name in the beginning. And the name was made flesh and tabernacled among us. And this name is Yahushua HaMashiach, who came in the name of Yahuah, whom ye have pierced. And they shall look upon him whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his et yakid, for his beloved one, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one is in bitterness for his firstborn, for he is the culmination of the firstborn seed of Yahuah. I call Israel my firstborn. It's written in Genesis. I call the seed of Yaakov my firstborn. It's written in the book of Jubilees. And what is the seed of Yaakov? The seed of Yaakov that comes from Abraham through Yitzchak to Yaakov, down from Yaakov to Yehudah, Yehudah to Pharez, and from Pharez through the line of kings to Yosef, the father of Miriam, and from Miriam, the seed of Yaakov, Yahushua, the ultimate seed of the firstborn. In that day there shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadad Rimmon in the valley of Megiddo. And the land shall mourn, every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their women apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their women apart. Now, why distinguish between the house of David here? Why distinguish between the house of David and the house of Nathan? What is this? Since when did the house of Nathan become important to anybody? Well, I can tell you when it did. The house of David, Matthew 1. The house of Nathan, Luke 3. Okay? The family of the house of Levi apart and their women apart, the family of Shimei apart and their women apart, and the families that remain, every family apart and their women apart. Okay. Now, speaking the truth says, is all this speaking of the land of Jerusalem? Well, yes, maybe. Remember that Jerusalem is the place of peace and safety. It's not necessarily a collection of bricks at a particular geographic location, but rather it is the peace and safety of Yahushua HaMashiach. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the Ruach Bitakunim. Oh, we already talked about this. Let's continue. Somebody must have had a duplicate slide here. In that day there shall be a fountain opened to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, says Yahuah Sebaot, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets and the unclean Ruach to pass out of the land. And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, You shall not live, for you speak lies in the name of Yahuah. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesies. And it shall come to pass in that day that the prophet shall be ashamed, every one of his vision, when he has prophesied. Neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. But he shall say, I am no prophet. I am a husbandman, even a vinekeeper, even a vine dresser. For man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in your hands? And who is wounded in his hands? Who is wounded in his hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd and against the man that is my fellow, says Yahuah Tsebaot. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. And I will turn my hand upon the little ones, and it shall come to pass that in all the land, says Yahuah, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die. But the third shall be left therein, and I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and try them as gold is tried. And they shall call upon my name, and I will hear them. And I will say, it is my people. And his people shall say, Yahuah Elohai. Not Hashem, not Adonai, Yahuah Elohai. Behold, the day of Yahuah comes, and your spoil shall be divided in the midst of you, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall Yahuah go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. Now, when we talk about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the city was taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. But all of the city was expelled. All of the city was expelled, and the name was changed. Okay. And how about this? This is still to come. And his feet shall stand on that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley. Half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the Negev. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Atzel. Yea, ye shall flee, like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziyahu, the king of Yehudah. And Yahuah Elohai shall come in all the Kodashim with you, and it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark. But it shall be one day which shall be known to Yahuah, not day nor night. But it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light, and it shall be in the day that living waters shall go forth from Jerusalem, half of them towards the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter it shall be. And Yahuah shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Yahuah, and his name one. All the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place. For Benjamin's gate, unto the palace of the first gate, and unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel, unto the king's wine presses. And men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. Okay, and all the land shall be turned. Yeah. Okay, so someone is saying they're having trouble with verse 10. The switch in personage doesn't make sense. They will mourn for him. Yeah, there is, you're right about this. We see this idea of first person and second person really quite common in terms of the translation and the rendering of the Hebrew. And again, The difficulty here has to do with the way the Hebrew semantics are equated. And so there are some issues there, right? There are some issues in that development. Yes, indeed. But all I can tell you is that we have to live. Okay, hold on just 1 minute. Hold on, my friends over here at Zoom are calling me. Okay, there we go. Everybody's good. All right. But you're right about that. When you talk about the personages that are inside the scripture, that we see this, sometimes first person, sometimes second person. And I don't know that it was written that crudely in the Hebrew, but the strict interpreter said, yeah, it was. Okay, and this shall be the plague wherewith Yahuah will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand on their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Sounds like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from Yahuah shall be among them, and they shall lay hold everyone in the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. That's describing, of course, the civil war. And Yahudah also shall fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and apparel in great abundance. And so shall be the plague of the horse, of the mule, of the camel, of the ass, and all the beasts that shall be in these tents as this plague. Very interesting. In other words, whatever is melting the flesh, the eyes and the tongue, is also going to do the same to the mule, the horse, the camel. All of the beasts that shall be in these tents will suffer the same thing. But it also predicts that at the same time that this is being consumed, that this plague is being consumed, that there is civil war. And it shall come to pass that a great tumult from Yahuah shall be among them. And they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. Oh yeah, that's revolution, civil war, anarchy, however you want to put it. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Yahweh's child. Thank you. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the king, Yahuah Tsevaot, and to keep the feast of Sukkot. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the king, Yahuah Tsevaot, even upon them there shall be no rain. And if the family of Mitzrayim goes not up and comes not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith Yahuah will smite the heathen that come not to keep the feast of Sukkot. This shall be the punishment of Mitzrayim and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the feast of Sukkot. Very important stuff, right? We're talking about the culmination of events here, the culmination of the events. There's still going to be the celebration of feasts. There's still going to be other nations, and these nations are not going to be part of the New Jerusalem, right? Okay. In that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses Kodesh LeYahuah, holiness to Yahuah, and the pots in Yahuah's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Yahudah shall be holiness unto Yahuah Tsevaot, and all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them, and see therein in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of Yahuah Tsevaot. No more Canaanites in the house of Yahuah Tsevaot. Okay. So there, my friends, we have journeyed through. I remember as well the complete discussion concerning Zakar-Yahu. Okay. And we have completed all of those chapters. So with that, let's go ahead and begin discussion, if we can, with questions. If there are questions on this, let's go to those questions and see what we come up with. And I'll see if I can actually read them. And if anybody sees Mark Leonard, or if you see him in the chat anywhere, let me know. And if I can't see his question, somebody else maybe can type it in. Okay. All right, let's see what we have going here. Look. Yeah, the false Messiah prophecy. Yeah. False Messiah prophecy, the Dajjal, right? And we get a very clear sign from Yahuah that this false prophet is going to be the Dajjal. It's going to be someone who's blind in one eye. And that's very powerful to be able to tell us what's going on and who's who. When you see somebody in that situation holding themselves out as a Mashiach. Okay. Okay, so Philip LeMay writes, the Septuagint reads, they shall look upon me because they have mocked me, and they shall make lamentations for him as for a beloved friend, and they shall grieve intensely as for a firstborn son. Yeah, Philip, that is a very interesting way of the Greek, translating it. And, they're saying that because they have mocked me. But, the mocking, this would be one understanding of this word nakav. When you look at the word nakav being the word for blasphemy, well, you have several choices. You can use the word blasphemy to say, well, that's mocking, or it's piercing. And we look at that very closely. It's kind of like piercing. Okay, Mark's not here. Okay, well, sorry about that, Jesse. Okay, let's see. Okay, all right. Okay, let's see. All right. Well, I guess I have answered every question. This is good. And I'm very thankful to that. So because of that, my friends, I'm going to say this. Let us be blessed coming into this upcoming Shabbat. I hope I will see you guys at the Shabbat meeting on Saturday. If not, write me at stephen@cepher.net and I'll send you an invitation. And I want to thank you guys for being such great people in the chat. Thank you for all your commitments and all your comments. And please share the video, and let's see what we can do. And who knows, we might be able to reach more people with the word. Okay, so Stephanie Meeks Crow writes, have you considered that KC3 might be the Antichrist? Well, that's a good question, Stephanie, and I can tell you that there are many people who believe that KC3 is the Antichrist. I think more likely is he is an Antichrist or an anti-Mashiach. But is he the Antichrist? That's another story. And I think that what we're seeing here now is we're seeing some very interesting things about what is the beast and who are the 10 kings. And the kinds of things that we're seeing now that are unfolding is something much, much different than what all of us expected. And so with that, yeah, I have considered it. There's some great people out there teaching on that his coat of arms indicates that he may be. But that's going to have to wait for another presentation, Stephanie, as I've talked about on other ones, but I can't do it here. Okay. So Yahuah's child said, you mentioned Muslim. Was the Muslim faith brought forth by a certain church? And the answer is, yeah, kind of. If you want to know the truth of it, it was actually created by both religions. In other words, it was created by both the Catholic Church and the Jewish religion. And many people believe that Muhammad could not read or write, and that the Quran was actually written by Jewish scribes. And you see many, many similarities actually between the Talmud and the Quran. But the Quran has its own aspects to it. People, of course, the Quran was demonized and Islam was demonized because George Bush wanted to, go to war with some people that he thought he could beat up. And so, trillions and trillions of dollars later, and it turns out there were no weapons of mass destruction, but we went ahead and destroyed Iraq and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan and a number of other nations, all claiming that these guys were the terrorists who took down the Twin Towers. Well, Islam is Islam, and they have their faith, and it is what it is. And they tend to be strident, and they tend to be assertive in imposing Islam, particularly when they take over a nation and demand Islamic fidelity. However, if you ever read the Quran, you'll find out that one of the chief tenets with which I have disagreement is the tenet that says Yah has no son. And of course, the interesting part is that when they say Yah has no son, they're thinking that, this is a Zeus kind of creation, but it's not. And the full understanding is something that I referred to our last program that we did here in the Seed of the Promise, to give you an idea of what we're talking about. What is the seed of the promise, and how that son came about. Thank you, Beck and Kurt Ekstrom. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Sinister RP. I appreciate that too, brother. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see. the Jesuits. Well, the Jesuits were not part of the creation of the Quran. The Jesuits didn't exist until centuries later. But Muhammad was initially married to a Catholic nun who was 21 years older than him, and she taught him much of the theology that he set forth in the first surah of the Quran called the Cow. But I don't want to get too far into Islam because I'm not a teacher on the Quran. Okay, let's see. Thank you, Judy Keel. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Yahuah's child. Okay, let's see. Very powerful. Feel the road. Just typing this. Okay. Okay. What if Islam people never get to hear about Yah? Well, this is true. And the Islamic people, I mean, it's not my ministry to speak to Islam, although I do speak to them when I come in contact with them. But, the key issue for Islamic people to hear about Yah is to open your ears. Open your ears and you will hear. But if you keep your ears closed, you will not hear. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, KW. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's see. So Debbie Johnson, of course, asks me my question on current world events. Thank you, Debbie Johnson. You're a great sister, and thank you. And I'll just share with you what's going on now. I think that we are coming to a point that we have an opportunity to arrive at peace in Ukraine. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we have walked up to the brink of nuclear war. And now the question is, are we going, if we continue, then we will cross the threshold into a nuclear confrontation. If we don't, and we back off and we say, okay, it's very clear that Ukraine on its own will never be able to displace Russia out of the occupied oblasts of Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, Mariupol and Kherson, and Crimea. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. And so should the war continue, and there's been an absolute mind-boggling slaughter of Ukrainian people, if it continues, there's going to be even more loss of life and even more destruction. Destruction is now coming to Lviv, for instance. And so the harnessing now needs to take place, and people need to say, okay, we've had enough. And I think the average human being says we've had enough. Thank you, Diane Marie Gulizbowski. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. And so here is my reasoning now. I've expressed this on Radio Free Alaska. If you take a state like Ukraine, Ukraine wanted to assert its autonomy like Britain did under Henry VIII. They wanted to assert their autonomy, and they wanted to assert their autonomy completely clear of Russian influence, the Russian language, and Russian nationalism. Well, okay, but that is inconsistent with the idea of we want to hold on to territorial claims over areas that are populated by Russian speakers who have a Russian culture and who have an identity that is associated with the nation of Russia. So it can't be both. You can't have both an ethnic purity, language, and cultural purity while you're reaching out to whole lands that are occupied by people that are not of the same ethnicity, culture, or language. So you have to decide what you want. And if you decide what you want is ethnic purity, which is what has been expressed in the Ukrainian leadership, well, then fine, have ethnic purity. But let go of the regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Hungarians. Let go of the region of Ukraine that is bordering Moldova called the Transnistria. Let go of those areas of Ukraine that are Russian-speaking, who have Russian culture and Russian nationalism at their heart. And if you do that, then you can have the ethnic purity you want and make arrangements with Russia to return its Russian statues and its Soviet memorabilia and so on and so forth. And this can be done peacefully with negotiations without starting a war, and you might be able to save another generation of people. Either that or you have to modify your position to say, okay, well, we can be a diverse society. But when you abandon diversity in favor of Ukrainian supremacy, it was a given that you were going to lose the Donbass. It was a given. And notwithstanding the encouragement of the babysitter Liz Truss or the babysitter Dr. Jill, or the babysitter Ursula van der Leyen, or any of the other babysitters, or the babysitter who's the wife of Emmanuel Macron, notwithstanding their opinion, you're not going in and saying we want ethnic purity and we want to seize the lands that do not contain Ukrainians by nature, by language, or by culture. Then you're engaged in an act of war, and war is what you're going to get, and war is what you did get. So we need to be reasonable about this, understand what the reasoning is, and move away. Okay, then we can have peace. And then once we have peace, we can come back to the table and say, okay, now let's figure out what we're going to do, and get rid of this World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the UN, and let's get back to some good old-fashioned nationalism. All right. Yeah, they just need to realize he's also this untrue. Yeah. There it is, Philip. That's a very good statement. Yeah, that the Muslims already know that Yahuah or Isa is the Mashiach, but they need to know that it is not Isa. You know, in Islam, they look to Isa, and Isa, there's a particular sets of prophecy governing Isa, but the name is Yahusha, as it is pronounced in the Quran. Yahusha. And so this. Once we get that cleared up, got it going. Okay, thank you, Debbie Johnson. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, love your neighbor as yourself. Amen to that. And so let us go forth with strength and conviction, love in our hearts, with extending judgment and mercy and compassion to one another, and reaching out our hands to those that have less. Okay, thank you, brothers and sisters, and we will see you again next week.